My name is Aleks Ryabin. I work in the vCloud Automation Center R&D. We'll talk today about the vCloud Automation Center extensibility and specific infrastructure extensibility, infrastructure as a service, and how it will help you to manage your environment and integrate with that. Couple of words about the rename of the suite in the product. So when I reference vCloud Automation Center, it is now would be called the vRealize Automation, and when I reference vCloud Orchestrator, its reference is a vRealize Orchestrator. So I'll be using the old names, otherwise I'll be confused. But so you know, this is the mapping to the new names. Very quickly on the agenda. So we'll talk about the virtualization infrastructure pain points and different problems that you have managing it. And then we'll go over some of the extensibility points of vCloud Automation Center. And like I said, specifically we'll talk about infrastructure. And we'll go over 4 areas. There are more, but we'll go over 4 areas as applicable to one of the use cases. We'll talk about the UI extensibility. We'll talk about the model manager extensibility. We'll talk about the external workflows and the extensibility. And then we'll talk about the guest OS extensibility. And then, you know, how that all matches up. And at the end, if I have a connection, then we'll do a live demo. Again, this is the system that is in US, so it might be a little slow, but hopefully it will be on, and we'll do the live demo, and we'll finish with the Q&A. To start it up, let's look at the
Harlem Shake.
Okay, you're probably wondering why we're watching Harlem Shake video here. So it's not really Harlem Shake video. It is showing how your everyday life at work is. So the idea of that is, 1 minute everything is calm, everything is easy, and a minute later suddenly you got a little escalation and everything goes crazy. So that's the idea of that. So as you start you know, your day, and you're right here, this, you know, architect sitting and trying to think about what is the next thing that you're going to do in your virtualization infrastructure. This little guy, his name is Harry Potter. He has while he was playing in the sandbox, he came up with this brilliant idea of the new application, right? So of course, because he's a brilliant engineer, he's gonna come and say, hey, I have this idea, I need this new desktop and I need a new server for me right away so I can go and build it. My application that's going to make millions. Now the problem is that in any enterprise you have some sort of ticketing system or something. So he's directed to the ticketing systems, he goes in, again, he's a brilliant engineer, but he can't write, right? Because no engineers can write, they can just, you know, do the applications. So he goes in and writes in the ticket is need desktop and server now, and submit the ticket. Now the problem, of course, with this is that that's probably not enough information. So the guys on the back over there, they get the ticket and they start to ping pong. It's like, oh, what does it mean? He needs a desktop, okay, yeah. And well, what is it? Is it the server desktop? Okay, how big is it? So they don't know. So they make a guess. Then it goes around the table, and guys over here comes up and say, hey, okay, we need to name it. So they put some sort of name of the machines in there, and it goes around, adds to the Active Directory, finds its location, which probably not the right location for the guys. So eventually when it comes back, you know, the name is wrong, the configuration of the server and the desktop is wrong. So eventually, once the application is ready, the desktop and the server is not, and that delays all the processing. Now imagine you have to do 1,000 of those, right? It's not just one engineer, not one application, but 1,000 of those. So what happens in this case is you need to do 1,000 provisioning, and it gets pretty crazy at this point. So let's now look at the details of that and see how this is applicable in real life and what we can do about this. So let's start with the life cycle. So the standard machine, regular life cycle, you have machine requested, approved, you go into the build, and then once machine is provisioning, you need to do some post-back operations, and then it goes to the lifecycle management, power on, power off, maybe reconfigure and other things. And once it's done, it goes into dispose, and the lifecycle starts. So this is very clean, very simple. Now the problem is in real enterprise, it's not that easy. It's not like that. That's what we just looked at the other video. So in reality, you have many more subsystems you need to integrate with. You have backups, you have CMDBs, you need to have static IP address configuration, you need to integrate with SSO, maybe custom provisioning subsystems, DNS, and so on. So it really becomes more complicated. Now, if you think about when you need to do that, and you start making these connections between which point you need to go and integrate, it becomes really crazy. So this is the same picture in that video that's showing that it's really crazy to go and integrate it. It's really complicated. So the question is that, what can we do to remove that pain so we don't do the busy work and we do really something interesting instead? What can we do so we can get from here to something really clean? So that kind of brings us to the vCloud Automation Center and how it can help you with those operations. So this is a vCloud Automation Center architecture. Again, like I said in the beginning, is we're going to go into the architecture, we're going to look at that, and we'll look at the extensibility points and see how that matches up to those things that we just went over in lifecycle management. So this is the actual architecture. I'm going to clean it up a little bit. So I know that this is an advanced session, but I'm going to cover a little bit on the basics so that in case if somebody is not very familiar with vCloud Automation Center, you understand how that's partitioned. So I'm going to go through the components and some of the things, and then we'll go into the specific extensibility points. So on the top over here, you have vCloud Automation Center virtual appliance. So it hosts the common services such as the Advanced Service Designer, Cafe, and Cafe includes internally things like catalog services, approval services, notification services, and things like that. On the left side, you have SSO appliance, or also called identity appliance. So this is the identity appliance that communicates with your identity providers, such as Active Directories and LDAP on the left side. And on the bottom, you have the Iaas components, which don't have to be in one box. They can be spread out, and they all run on the Windows systems. So if we clean a little bit more, this will leave us with the components that we will be concentrating on today. So if you look inside, on the left side, you'll see the managers tier. So the managers tier are responsible for the kind of its brains of the operation, responsible for stateful workflows. So as your machine goes through the different states, it needs to be recorded, somebody has to manage it. So that happens in the managers tier over here. On the right side, you have the agents tier. So this is the opposite, which is it's an agent that's responsible for doing work items. So they need to go and connect to something and do something. So it's a very quick, stateless workflows, and they communicate with the external subsystems. They communicate with the hypervisors, whether it's been cloud, physical, or virtual, and they also communicate with the third-party subsystems, such as DNS providers, Active Directory providers, backups, and so on. And that can be done through the vCenter orchestrator, which has a lot of plugins to do that. And in the middle tier, you have the Iaas tier. So this is your presentation and also backend tier. It gives an access from the outside and from inside to the internal data services, as well as the presentation services that goes back through the virtual appliance. There was a session, MGT2587, that was presented a couple of days ago. If you didn't go on it, please look at the recording. It will be available after VMworld. That session talks about part of the extensibility that we are not going to cover here. So it's very important that you actually go and look at that. That is the next generation extensibility that is available on the product right now. It talks about advanced service designer. It talks about the second-day operations and how you can configure, how you can export it from VCO. So please do look at that. But we are not going to talk about it. We're going to concentrate on the infrastructure extensibility. So this particular session, which is 2487, is going to talk about that component that's outlined over here. So just want to make sure that you understand, we're not talking everything, we are talking specifically about the infrastructure, but the idea is that to show how much we have built in there so you can use it. So if you come back kind of to the video at the beginning, if you remember the problem that's, I depicted was that the Harry Potter is the brilliant developer, but he cannot type, right? So the problem is that he needs to talk to someone to be able to describe what he really needs. So in this case, you can certainly get a Dobby, right? So Dobby is the friendly elf who will be able to go and submit this request for him. So that would be the project manager or the manager or somebody else in the team who can go and actually describe the whole operation to what needs to be done. Or you can go with the automation, right? So that kind of brings us to the GUI extensibility. So I'm going to, again, cover a little bit of the basics so that it's understood what we are talking about as far as the extensibility concerned. And instead of Dobby in this case, I would like to have this guy. Who knows who he is, right? You all look to Despicable Me, right? So, so this is a minion. So minion is small and quick, and they can go around, and it's very cheap. And it's awesome if you have a lot of minions, right? So because those can go around, they run around, and they can do things for you. So you can think about that, the little minions, when I'm going to talk about the custom properties. So the vCloud Automation Center has a construct called custom properties. And it's very important because we're going to talk about GUI extensibility, and it's placed the central lore there. The custom properties is basically name-value pairs that's attached to the machine, and they travel throughout the life cycle of the machine management so that we can go and attach certain metadata to the machine and then use it later on in a special processing of the different stops. Okay? What's important is that you can configure it throughout the vCloud Automation Center on any level. You can do it on a blueprint, you can do it on a reservation, on an endpoint, anywhere. But what's going to happen is when you request a machine, they're all going to be aggregated, flattened, and you're going to have a one flat list of the different properties. So depending on who you are, where you come from, your set of properties is going to be different. So if you are the end user, you may get one set of properties. If you are administrative, it's another set of properties. If you are in the different groups, you can have a different property. So, but the idea is that using the same blueprint, you can technically get different set of properties, different information in there. And that's going to travel throughout the provisioning of the machine. One other point is, and it's very important here, is that you can mark one of these minions to be prompted at the runtime. So what that means is when machine is requested, at the runtime, user will be presented with the choice or the values to be entered, and that value will be recorded and then be traveling. So you can actually, at the request time, have the user provide the information. Again, remember the Harry Potter could not write it at the beginning. So, and the important thing is about this, you need to be able to present it in a very efficient way so there will be no errors. So here's a little video that I have recorded so you can see the, I don't know why it does that, but for some reason it jumps around a lot. Okay. So this is a video of the blueprint. So what we talked about is just custom properties. And the way that you configure it, you go and configure it either in the blueprint, build profile, reservation, other levels. So this is a demo of the blueprint, so you can see how do you configure a specific building machines. And now it will go to the properties tab. And in the properties tab, you will see the name value pairs that you can present. Again, you can include it over here on the or you can build the build profiles and then include it over there. There's other places where you can configure it, but just for the demonstration, this is where you can do it. And you can see this, there is a name value pairs that presented to you. So that configuration is done by the administrator. So once the administrator do this, it will be given to the user and be used at the request time. So this kind of brings us to the next point, which is the feature called property dictionary. So the problem with the custom properties are they're flat, right? They don't have any specific type or anything. So if you present it to the user at the request time, it will show up as the edit box. And it's not very clear what user needs to input, and they can input erroneous information. So in order to help with that, what we have feature called property dictionary. So the property dictionary gives the type, knowledge of the type to the custom properties. It gives you the ability to set what specific control you want to show to the user so that you can show to the user the checkbox or the drop-down or other things. It also ensures that the input is valid. So it can validate the input and make sure that whatever the user entered is validated before it gets requested, before it's too late. It also allows you to define the child, parent-child relationships. So such as if you enter one value in one field, then it will automatically populate the other field with the choices that correspond to that one value. And of course, it provides the descriptive value, right? So you don't want to show like something like x.y.z. You show to the user description. This is a backup. Do you want to be enable it? So it allows you to show it as a descriptive value on the screen when machine is being requested. And you can control the layout, meaning that how you want to show it. Do you want to show it as a first, the second, or the third, and things like that. So this is all comes out of the box. In addition, it is also a framework. So this kind of comes to the extensibility point. So you can build your own controls and you can enable them. So if the standard control that comes out of the box is not enough, you can, if you have a will and the know-how, you can go and build it. And you can insert it without modifying the core product. And then your controls will show on the request page. If we have time, again, I'll show it during the demo. So this is a video showing how you configure the property dictionary. Again, this is just a quick video so that we have the base foundation to establish there. And if we have time during the demo, I'll show it. So you can see here there's the name of the property and the display name is shown. So the name is what's going to be saved as a metadata and display is what's going to be shown. And then you select on the right side what type of this property is going to be showing up. There's also an attributes on the right side where you can go and select what specific attributes, specific control. So if you can see there, we added the type here with the description. And then when the user requests the machine, they can go and do it. So property dictionary control is established, then the custom property by this name is added to the blueprint, the prompt user is selected, and then after that, when you go and request the machine, suddenly you see that, but not as the, some obscure name, but something that's actually going to make sense to the user, and they will be able to select and see it. So, and like I said, these controls allow you to very broad extensibility in order to be able to give user ability to input the right data. So when Harry goes in and provides the input, he can select that. Here's the things I want. He can select the specifics of his request. So this is the same thing, but a little bit enhanced, so you can see it because the video might be a little long, small. So in the next step, we'll talk about the model manager extensibility. So the model manager extensibility includes a lot of different things. The model manager itself is the more or less data access layer with the security built in there. So it allows you to do a lot of different things, including one of the extensibility points, which is the hostname generation and validation. So when you request a machine, you will need to provide the machine name to that, and you need to make sure that if the machine name is generated, it's unique. So vCloud Automation Center have out-of-the-box capability to generate the name and validate the name. So the names are important to be generated according to your internal standards, and it can have all different kind of properties. So, and out of the box, we have multiple plugins available, which is again built on the extensibility of the product to allow you to do different things. So as far as the generation, the out-of-the-box plugin that allows you to generate a name has the basic prefix that you configure and then the increasing suffix or index. But you don't have to stop there. You can build your own plugins, and if your name generation, for instance, requires some complicated naming schema that maybe needs to be queried from the third-party subsystem, you can do that because again, the framework is there. You just have to build it. In fact, we built some samples, and I'll show you during a demo how, for instance, you can go and call into the external subsystem and using VCO and you generate name there. Or you can build it from the name of the metadata provided as a custom properties. And then the values of the custom properties will be concatenated at the request time, and the names will be generated based on these values. We also include the validation plugin. So once the machine name generated, you need to make sure that it's unique. And out of the box, there are 3 plugins. One is the validates name against database. So that's the machines that we know of. And there are other 2 plugins. One is that validates names against Active Directory, so that makes sure that the machine doesn't exist in the Active Directory. And the third one that's the same against DNS. So in case you have a DNS validation that not in the Active Directory or we don't know about these machines. Again, you don't have to stop there. It is a framework. You can build another, your own plugins, which will go and validate to some third-party subsystem, or maybe in your CMDB or somewhere else. So, and you can build these plugins and then configure and use them. So this is the a configuration example of how you can configure plugins. If you go to the global properties administration screen, there is a location there we can validate when you can enable one plugin or the other, and as well if you generate your own plugin and you configure it and insert them, it will show up over here so that the administrator can use it. So again, so the developer who will be building the plugins will have the access to insert that, and the administrator doesn't need to go and know about these. They can go and configure it in the UI. So the next one is the master workflow and state transition extensibility. So that's the third portion. So remember, now that we have collected the requirements at the request time and we have generated the machine and validated machine name, the next thing is you need to go and build the machine. And as you're building the machine, if you remember the life cycle, this is where you need to start calling out to the third-party internal subsystems, such as IPAM or DNS or Active Directory. So we do have extensibility throughout the master workflow, which is the workflow that manages the life cycle of the machine, and we'll look at that. So what does the state transition workflow extensibility allows you? It allows you to do a lot of different things in different steps, such as maybe you need to do custom machine name, Active Directory or DNS resolution. Maybe you need the IPAM, you need to pull for the IP address. Maybe you need to integrate with the ticketing subsystem or CMDB, backup, monitoring, and so on. So all of those will have to be inserted in the specific steps. And we have these hooks available for you out of the box that you can utilize. So as you go through that, I'll show you one of the use cases, right, which is very generic but applicable very often. So as you go through the provisioning and you go to the approval, very often you need to go and integrate with some ticketing subsystem. And then if you go through the provisioning or managing or retiring, you need to go in and update CMDB on the lower side. And then as you go and you build your machine, you need to do the maybe custom scripting inside of the guest OS. So this is the state transitions that I'm talking about, and everywhere there you will be able to hook up your specific business logic and integrate with that. So let's look at the details. So this is the master workflow is reflected over here, and what you see in the boxes over here is the states in the master workflow. This is the real states as it's right now in the vCloud Automation Center, and you can see this is very closely reflects what we looked at the beginning of lifecycle management. So you can hook up to all of these different states, requested, waiting to build, building machines, managing, and so on, and call out to your specific business logic during those times. So this yellow, little circles over here show you where you can hook up, and this is available out of the box. What we provide together with the product is already pre-baked stub workflows that hooked up to, to those states. And in order to be able to utilize those stub workflows, you can do two things. You can either use VCO, and the VCO has an extensibility that is able to hook up to this, or you can use Designer that will allow you to modify those. So when there is a tool that's called VCC Designer that allows you to go and load the workflow, which is the stub workflow, and this workflow is already pre-built with all the planning. So the only thing that it has in the middle is the custom code. This is where you need to insert your own code. You don't need to do anything else. And again, if we have a time, I'll show you during a demo. As you drill in, for instance, in here, I dropped an activity from the left side, which sets a custom property, and the value is on the right side. You can go and hook up here, maybe to call to the PowerShell script. Or on the left side, you can also select the call out to the datacenter orchestrator, and then use the orchestrator to walk through the your business logic and do it there. So the last piece in the extensibility, so now that we have all the details of the request and generated name, and we hooked up to all of the different transitions to be able to integrate with your business logic, is the guest OS, right? So there's always something that you need to do with the guest OS. Not only you need the operating system, but you need to configure it. You need to potentially install different things in there. So for that, we have a guest agent. This guest agent is installed inside of the guest operating system, so whether it's being Linux or Windows. And it allows you to do a number of things. You can control it using the same custom properties which we already talked about. Okay? So in general, guest agent, also internally called Gugent, is really just a scripting agent. It's a dumb scripting agent. It doesn't have any smarts inside of it. All it does, it receives the commands from the brains of the operations and executes scripts. You can run any scripts you want, whether it's being in a local file system, on a network, maybe mounted on an ISO image, and then you can control it, which script's going to be run when, using custom properties. Okay? So the things that you might want to do is you might want to configure the operating system, maybe install third-party agents such as backup, SSO, monitoring, and so on. So using these different operations, you will be able to go and just install this without really any additional work, and the custom properties will allow you to do that. So this is it for as far as the details of the different things. I'm going to now switch over to the demo system, and I'll try to show you the different components of that we went through. So this is vCloud Automation 6.1. I have over here different users logged in. I will use this screen for the regular user, and I will switch over to a different screen for the administrative user. So this is going to be easy, so I can switch over back and forth and show what the admin does, and then how that's reflected in the end user. So the first thing first is that let's look at the blueprint. Again, I showed it in the video, but this is the actual details in there. So you can see if you look at the inside of the blueprint, once it gets there, initially what I did, I didn't configure any of the specific custom properties. So when I go to the custom properties screen, nothing is selected. It's all empty. Okay. Now if I go to the standard user and request a machine, what I'm going to see there is just something that comes out of the box. It doesn't have any specific configuration other than ability to configure what the CPU, memory, and the storage size. There is no additional custom properties. Now if I go and change that to select to have additional properties, let's say for instance, I'll select this extensibility demo build profile, and what it does, it adds 3 properties. So all of them, I mean 2 of them as you can see, set prompt to user and 2 of them are not, and then there is another property that is not shown. So now if I click OK and go back to the user screen and click on the request again, what's going to happen here is that suddenly we will see 2 additional controls here, 2 checkboxes. One says enable SSO, another one enable backup. So user can select, in this case, whether they want to enable SSO on the backup. Again, this is just presentation. So, but if you remember, when I went in here, I didn't have these words, enable SSO, enable backup. What I had here is extensibility.backup and extensibility.sso. So remember we talked about property dictionary. So now that I have that enabled, I can go back in here and I can look at the property dictionary. So if I go into the property dictionary controls screen, you'll see that enable SSO and the backup configured here, right? They're configured as being checkboxes right here. And I can change it to something else. So this is how it maps between the actual custom properties and how you present it. I can go and change the wording right here without any coding specifically, and it will show up reflected there. So now if I go and add a little bit more, and just for sake of the timing, I'm going to go and add all possible different custom properties in there that I'm going to show you. Okay. You'll see that there is a way more properties that's going to be now available. Okay. I'm going to go over all of them, but as you can see by the description, I have a demo set up such as we will do a custom integration with Active Directory, DNS, hostname generation, and we also the placement. So you can select which way you want to go. Again, this is all done using the extensibility point, which I just described to you. Okay, so as you can see, all I did right now, I just selected these custom properties. I haven't done anything else. Now, if I go back into the this screen, I cancel this out, and I request this again. Again, the same user, the same blueprint. The only thing I changed is enable this additional custom properties. What you will see is you will see way more properties that's available here, way more inputs that's available here. So user will be able to select not only whether you want to enable backup or not, but also they will be able to select, for instance, what's the machine type. So if you go back to the scenario that we described at the beginning is that, remember the Harry needed to have 1 desktop and 1 server. So you can go and configure it and say, okay, I would like to have a server and I would like to have a desktop. Okay, and you can do this as a multi-machine as well by selecting, by building the blueprint that includes multiple machines in there. So let's say, for instance, I will select this is going to be application server. Okay, there's also over here selected as the completion domain. So this is the integration with the DNS that I said. Again, this is a custom integration. I just use the extensible point, and right now it is as a free form set VMworld.local. Now the problem with this, if I go in and change this and type in here additional wording, that's not going to be valid. So it's probably not the right selection. It shouldn't be a free-form edit text box, even though it says completion domain. It should be something that's selectable by user and specifically fixed to your environment. So again, I'm going to go back into the UI, and I'm going to go back to the property dictionary. I'm going to change the control that represents the name completion, and from a text box, I'm going to select the list picker. So if I select drop-down list, and then go to the attributes of this list, so you can see what kind of values can be selected. You can see here I configured value list to be VMworld.local and VMworld.demo.local. So what's supposed to happen now, if I go into the user mode here and I cancel this out, and I go in the request again, now I should see a drop-down list which has two different values, and only two values can be selected by that particular user. One is VMworld.local, another one VMworld.demo.local. Okay? So this is how you can restrict so that the users do not select something not valid. So let's say again I select the application server and I select the reservation policy. So what is the reservation policy in this case? This uses extensibility point to be able to select what's the location of this, what the policy should be selected which is attached to this specific reservation. As you can see here, I have one cluster configured in Burlington, another one is in London. So depending on which one I choose, the machine will be placed in a specific cluster. Again, if you choose to do that. And additionally, we have these two checkboxes, enable backup, enable SSO. Now, let's say you do have a requirement in your environment to be able to actually generate the machine name based on where you place the server, or what type of server is that. So you remember one of the extensibility point name generation plugin. So what we have here, I have configured this name generation plugin, which is a custom plugin that we built. And that name generation plugin allows you to go and configure the name based on the custom properties that you have selected. So as you can see over here, if I can get to it, this is name validation. So this is a name generation. I have a name format that is in the following format. It says the state, location, and the function, okay, in here. And this is the global setting. But at the same time, remember this is hierarchical. I can go and change that to be specific to that particular blueprint. And that name format can change depending how you want to do this. So if I go back in the blueprint and I show you what it actually overwritten to, you can see here, though, the way that its name format is generated would be VMW dash, and then there's a data center location, and then the machine type. So remember, data center location is reflected by the drop-down where I want to be, either in Burlington or London, and the machine type is whether it's a desktop or something else. Now, obviously, I don't want to put a desktop there or some other long name. It is a name that needs to be short. So what we have in this custom control that I showed you at the request time, so even though it looks like a standard drop-down control, it is actually a custom control that built for this demo, so you can see the extensibility of that particular feature. And that custom control calls out to the PowerShell script, and that PowerShell script does the mapping for me. So what happens is when you go to there and you click on the drop-down, it actually calls to the PowerShell script, and you can see over here, if my group is developers, it will go and populate it. That drop-down will have a desktop, application server, database server, and other server. Depending what you choose, the value that's actually going to be saved is going to be one of those on the right. So if it's desktop, it's going to be DK. If it's application server, it's going to be AP, and so on. So again, this would be reflecting to your specific organization, encoding of the host naming, which everybody have a different. Again, this is just an example, but it shows you how you can do that. So what's going to happen is, supposed to happen, when I select this, the name that's going to be generated should be generated based on this location that I chose. So now, as far as these two checkboxes down there, okay, well, this is just presentation. You still need to go and actually do the work of integrating with SSO, integrating with the backup. So what I did is I configured, those plugins, state plugins, so that it will be calling to the VCO. So I have a VCO over here, and I have a backup integration workflow and SSO integration workflow. Okay, so one of these workflows will be called during the backup and integration, and the other one during SSO. And as we run through the provisioning, we'll look at that, how they are called and how the values is going to be passed through. So enough talking, let's go and submit this. So now that I submitted, as soon as we can see that this is actually gets submitted, what we can do is that we can look at the actual back-end log and see how the machine gets submitted. So this is the model manager log. As you remember, we talked about it. This is what generates the host name and validates it. So this is the request that comes in. So I'm telling on the log. And this is where it generates the name, and then it will call the validation of that name as well. So we got the name, it generated. You can see that VMW-LON, because you selected London location, it's AP. And the next number was 5. Okay? And then it went and did the validation against Active Directory, because I enabled the validation against Active Directory. You can enable validation against other things as well, right? So as you can see, it also went and tried to validate against the VCO. So I have configured the VCO validation plugin that goes into the VCO and does the validation of the name. So here's the name validation workflow. It's a very simple workflow here just for demonstration. And all it does is just goes in and says, hey, I successfully validated name. That's it, nothing else. But the point is that while we were doing it, it went in and requested and started provisioning. So machine name has been requested, and now we can look at the actual provisioning subsystem, and it does the provisioning of it. As it goes through the provisioning workflows, there are different things that we did. Remember, we attached and enabled SSO and enabled backup. So what we did is we are supposed to call out into the VCO again to do the SSO integration first before provisioning, and after provisioning completes, it will do backup integration. So now let me switch over to the VCO. You can see that the SSO integration workflow is called. So there we go. It showed up over here. As you can see, all this property is being passed in. And the very last thing, and I don't know if you can see it there, unfortunately it's very small, but what it does here, I put a print there. And the print says, adding extensibility property SSO not enabled for machine. So it is reflecting whether you have selected the request time SSO checkbox or not. And we did not. We selected the backup, but we didn't select the SSO. So this is done and processed. And the next thing is, if you look at there, machine gets provisioned. So machine already has provisioned. You can see that this is a building machine, and then it went to the provisioning state. In the provisioning state, once it got provisioned, I wanted to integrate with backup once the machine is built. So as you can see over here, it also calls into the backup integration workflow, which is calling into the VCO again. So let's go back to the VCO very quickly and look at the backup. So here we go. There is a one execution that happened while we were talking. And it's very similar to the other workflow, and it just prints out over here. And you can see the extensibility backup status property backup enabled for machine. So again, that's reflects of what we had with the checkbox. So user has selected at the request time something, and it's reflected directly to your steps that's being executed during provisioning. So if the user wants it so, it will be executed. If it don't, then it's not going to be executed. And again, you can obviously let the user choose it or not, depending on your policies. You can just configure it at the blueprint and have that mandatory. So this went through the whole life cycle. So the last thing that I wanted to show here is the integration with the Active Directory. So again, I have enabled that integration, and if you refresh it here, you can see that the machine has been created in Active Directory, and the completion domain, as you can see over here, set to the value that you have requested, which is VMworld demo.local. Now what's interesting, and I kind of didn't do that here, but the machine account was created before the provisioning, and this is where we hooked up this integration, but DNS name has been configured after the provisioning, so that you already have the actual machine join the domain, and you know what the domain name, and you configure this machine with the actual IP address, then it will, once it joins domain, you will get the DNS. So to summarize, let me go back into the this extensibility. We just went through this, and I showed you different things, how you can show the UI with the different items in there, and the user can input that. We did the SSO and the backup integration with using state transitions, name generation, which is the, in the validation, which is the model manager extensibility, and the placement over here as well. Now, the only thing I didn't show you is the guest OS extensibility, and that is because the machines that I built is actually test machines. They don't go to the real hypervisor right now. I use the test agent to do that. So, you really need the actual guest OS in order to be able to do this. So let me switch back. So in conclusion, as you can see that there's a lot of extensibility points in the vCloud Automation Center, and they do help you to manage your infrastructure so that you don't have to spend all your time trying to figure out how you're going to do all of these things by hands. So using vCloud Automation Center, you can decrease the complexity of your virtualization management infrastructure without completely replacing it. Questions? There is a microphone over here. If you can just speak to the microphone, would be great.
The question is regarding automating a large number of VMs. So normally in an enterprise, an infrastructure architect will create a design, and maybe we'll have 20, 50 virtual machines that need to be created. Is there a way to bulk import configurations, maybe using a spreadsheet, into the Cloud Automation Center and obviously deploy those?
There's no way to import it right now in the current version, 6.1 version, but in 6.2 version, there will be a way to export and import configuration. So that's the version that comes out at the end of this year. So right now, you would have to configure this directly in the system, and the only way it would be to do that, you would have to use the database export and import to do this. So it is not supported out of the box in UI, but you can do this using advanced tools. But like I said, in the vCloud Automation Center 6.2, in the next version, it will be available to go and export and import it. Next question.
We have lots of different SLAs, and each SLA has a different backup policies. So when a user chooses a SLA for a virtual machine, I want to show them backup policies which is associated with that SLA. So I need a dynamic custom properties.
Okay, well, so this is exactly what I just showed you. So like, for instance, if you remember, I showed you different types of machine. So imagine this is not a types of machine, but SLA, right? So you can provide the drop-down for the user if you want the user to select it, and it will be shown at request time. Or if you are building a specific type, you can link it to the specific SLA policy and make it mandatory for user to select. If they're building, let's say, critical production server, then it will be automatically be this. But if you want to use the same blueprint and let the user choose that, you can do this using exactly the property control that I just showed you. And you don't even need to use the custom control. You can use the out-of-the-box control. You just put the different SLAs policies. And then these policies will be consumed by your backend workflow. So if you remember, I showed the backend workflow for, let's say, for the backup, right? It didn't have anything other than print. But as you built into your business policy in the vCenter orchestrator to call out to your backup subsystem, you can pass that information, say, OK, I would like to have a gold or bronze or whatever that is. OK? Next question.
I would like to publish a deployed multi-machine blueprint to a specific user within a business group. Is it possible?
Yes, of course. So we didn't really cover it here, but this is just basic functionality of the product. It's called entitlements. So you can entitle the specific users or groups to different blueprints. So if, and that's what I showed you on the different UI screens. So there is the administrator screen because I was enabled as administrator, and the other one was the end user. So that end user was in a specific group. So as you entitle the users to specific blueprints, they will see these blueprints or not.
Not to the blueprint, to a deployed blueprint.
Yes, to deploy blueprint. So you have to configure blueprint. You have to publish it to the cafe or to the so it will show up in the catalog. And then as you go into the catalog, again, I didn't show that because this is more of the basic functionality. If you go into the catalog itself and use the entitlement configuration, you can entitle the users or groups to see one catalog or the other, or one catalog item. It can be the blueprint, individual blueprint. It could be multi-machine blueprint, or it could be advanced service designer blueprint.
But it's on the template, not the deployed blueprint.
Well, maybe it's a terminology, so let's talk after that, and we'll go talk about it. There's a question on the back over there. Yeah, let's. I'm a half, deaf from yesterday, so it would be great if you.
Thank you. Right, so looking at version 6.0, and actually 6.1 as well, a lot of the extensibility needs to be performed completely outside of vCAC, using the orchestrator, etc. And the default blueprints or default workflows, they are extremely cloud-oriented, as in you shouldn't ever have to choose the host name. You should always just let the system generate it for it, etc. But in very many cases in large production environments, there are a lot of things that you actually do have to choose manually, and you would want to. Do you know if the product has a roadmap for making the blueprints slightly more extensible upfront, as in that they come with the concept of a CMDB and the concept of DNS as something that you need to seed, etc.?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand anything because there was an echo here.
Yeah.
Is this about the name generation?
Sorry?
Is it about name generation? Or
Well,
we can take it offline and talk about it a little later if you're okay with that.
Name generation is an example of something that it doesn't do for you, or rather it will generate names. If you want the names to be manual input, you actually have to do a bit of work around it. Now, host names, of course, is a property, so you can just make the user select it. But for slightly more advanced things, such as interacting with an external IPAM system, there's no concept of calling out to an IPAM. There's just a concept of calling out to orchestrator as part of the state changes in the workflow, which means that there's a lot more work on your end to develop these custom properties than it would have been if the concept existed inside of vCAC.
Sorry, I apologize. I couldn't. There's an echo here. I couldn't really understand. If you don't mind, we can take it offline, and right after we can talk about it. But like I said, you could, if this is about giving the user the option to generate the name or not, you can mandate the specific name. Again, this is just, or not.
It's more, will there be out-of-the-box pre-configured integrations to things like IPAMs and DNS and common enterprise tasks versus a more generic VCO, I'm opening the door to let
So out of the box, and that's the whole point, is out of the box you have generic integration that's available to do anything you want on those points. This was just a demo that we cooked up right before to show you that you can easily turn into the IPAM, backup, SSO, and any other integrations. I hope that I answered the question, or not, then we can talk a little later. Any other questions? Okay. Yes?
I'm not sure if the previous gentleman meant exactly the same, but in a design phase, normally you have to actually reserve the IP addresses and the host names before maybe another team, maybe the networking team or the firewall team, can put the firewall rules in place before you deploy the virtual machines. So the question is, you can actually go through the process of kind of deploying the VMs, requesting the name, the IP address, and reserving all of those, and put that task on pause, maybe for however long you want, before maybe there is other tasks that are done manually, like firewall rules, and then you can click the button again and have the VMs configured, deployed. Is that correct? Or?
Well, again, you can provide this information request time, if you configure the, your blueprint to be, that's the user would go and provide the actual IP address and actual, whatever you want to request the user, or you can do it during the life cycle. So I'm not sure if I'm understanding the question right, but again, it's you as a designer of the configuration of this particular system responsible to say what you're giving, what kind of control you're giving to the end user. If you want the end user to provide it, they can provide the request time. If you want to do it as a mandatory option and integrate, let's say, with the external IPAM subsystem before machine gets provision, you can do it, and that was a demo that I showed you. So you can go and right before machine gets provisioned, based on the information that's in there, go and reserve IP address. Again, go meaning that VCO would go and reserve IP address. This IP address will be received, and then we will populate it, and machine will be configured this IP address. Okay. All right. I think we are out of time. If you have any more questions, we can talk about it after that. But again, in conclusion, I just want everybody think about what kind of pain points you have in your virtualization infrastructure, and then talk to your trusted VMware advisor how the vCloud Automation Center can solve these issues. Thank you.